I knew my mother-in-law didn't like me, but I never expected she'd humiliate me in front of an entire luxury restaurant. I walked in, dressed my best, only to realize every seat was taken, except the one meant for me, which didn't exist. She leaned back smirking and said, "Maybe a cheap bar fits you better." But what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the moment I asked for the owner, everything in that room would flip upside down. Before I jump into the rest of the story, do me a small favor. Tap the like button and subscribe if you want to hear more real, personal experiences like this. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and it lets me keep sharing moments that have shaped my life. All right, let me start from the beginning. I arrived early on purpose, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I didn't want to give my mother-in-law one more reason to pick at me. The restaurant she chose, her favorite luxury spot, was the kind of place where you could smell expensive decisions before you even walked in. Velvet chairs, polished floors, lighting soft enough to hide wrinkles but bright enough to show you couldn't afford anything on the menu. I stood outside for a moment, fixed my shirt, and told myself, just be patient. Tonight might go well. Emma had said her mom was trying. I wanted to believe her. Inside, the host greeted me with a polite smile and guided me toward the private dining area. I felt my nerves loosen a bit when I saw Emma already seated. Her face lit up the second she noticed me. She gave this tiny wave, the one she does only when she's genuinely happy. And, for a moment, everything felt normal. Then I saw her mother, Linda. Arms crossed, posture perfect, expression unreadable. The kind of unreadable where you know the reading would still make you feel bad. I approached the table with a smile, holding a small box of chocolates her mother liked. At least, I assumed she liked them. She once praised them in passing, and I'd been clinging to that scrap ever since. "Good evening," I said, trying to sound relaxed. Linda's eyes flicked to the box. "Oh," she said lightly, "you brought sweets." No thank you, no acknowledgement, just that subtle sting. I tried not to let it get to me, but then I looked at the table. 8 chairs, 8 place settings, every seat taken, every seat counted for, none left empty, none missing a napkin or glass, none shifted aside waiting for me. I blinked at it, waiting for my brain to catch up. Maybe a waiter forgot. Maybe Emma's sister moved chairs around. Maybe... Did they forget a place? Emma asked, noticing the same thing. Before I could answer, Linda spoke up. No, they didn't forget. Her tone wasn't sharp. That was the thing about her. She never sounded intentionally cruel. She sounded matter-of-fact, like her judgments were logic, not insults. Emma frowned. "Mom, you said Daniel was invited." "I said it would be lovely if you two came," Linda corrected gently, swirling the wine in her glass. "But the reservation is very limited. Private rooms have fixed seating. It's complicated." It didn't look complicated. It looked deliberate. I took a slow breath and tried to give her a way out. "If they can bring an extra chair," Linda cut me off with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, no. Let's not cause trouble. Besides," she gave me a quick glance, then looked back at her wine. "I wasn't sure you'd feel comfortable here." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Soft, sweet, perfectly polite. Wrapped in velvet, but sharp underneath. I heard her sister-in-law shift awkwardly in her seat. Someone coughed. A waiter passing by slowed as if wondering whether he should intervene. "Mom," Emma whispered through clenched teeth. "Stop." Linda chuckled lightly, brushing it off. "I'm just being honest. This isn't exactly his scene. Maybe a simpler place would make him feel less out of place. A simple place, less out of place." I felt my ears getting hot, but I forced my shoulders to stay relaxed. I'd dealt with this before, these comments that sounded harmless until you sat with them, comments that pretended to be about class or taste but were really about judgment. Emma squeezed my hand under the tablecloth. Her thumb traced the side of my palm, her way of asking silently, "Are you okay?" I nodded back. I didn't want her to feel worse than I did. One of the waiters drifted closer, hesitant. He glanced at the table, then at me, as if he sensed something was off. Linda leaned back in her chair, tapping her nails on the stem of her glass. "Well," she said, "we really should order. Daniel, dear, you're welcome to wait at the bar if you'd like. They have more approachable options." There it was, the hit she'd been aiming for all night. I waited for the sting. It didn't come this time, not the way she expected, because while she was talking, I was putting together a timeline in my head. The layout of the restaurant, the lighting, the design choices that felt familiar, a menu detail I recognized from years before, and something clicked. Something she didn't know. Something no one at that table knew. I straightened gently, not angry, not smug, just calm. Deeply calm. "Excuse me," I said softly to the nearest waiter. He turned immediately. "Yes, sir." "Could you let the owner know that Daniel Reed is here? I'd like to speak with him for a moment, if possible." For one heartbeat, the waiter froze. Not confused, not annoyed, just surprised. Then he nodded quickly. "Of course, right away, sir." He left faster than I expected, heading straight toward the back. Linda blinked at me, puzzled. "You know the owner?" Not mocking this time, genuinely unsure. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because explaining it now would sound like bragging, and bragging was the last thing I wanted to do. Instead, I looked at Emma. She looked at me like she sensed something shifting, even if she didn't yet know what. Under the table, she squeezed my hand again. This time, I squeezed back, and quietly, in that warm, expensive room filled with people who thought they already knew who I was, I waited. Not to prove anything, not to get revenge, just to let the truth walk in on its own. And it was already on its way. While the waiter disappeared into the back, the table shifted into that kind of silence people pretend isn't happening. Forks moved. Someone cleared their throat. A chair scraped quietly against the floor. Everyone acted like they were still reading menus, but it was obvious. They were all waiting to see what happened next. I kept my eyes on the empty spot where my seat should have been. Not angry, not embarrassed anymore, just thinking. Because the truth was, tonight wasn't about a chair. It was about years of being misunderstood. And it wasn't completely Linda's fault. Not really. She only knew the version of me she bothered to see. The guy who drove a normal car, worked a job that didn't sound impressive at dinner parties, grew up in a neighborhood without gated entrances or wine cellars. She didn't know who I was before she met me. She never cared to ask. But Emma did, and that's why I'm still here. I heard her shift her chair closer to mine, her fingers brushing the back of my hand. She was tense, like she felt responsible for the entire evening. I leaned toward her just slightly and whispered, "It's okay. Really." She gave me that half-smile she uses when she wants to believe me but isn't sure she does. And for a moment, that memory, how we met, how everything started, flooded back. I met Emma 3 years before this dinner. It wasn't planned or cinematic. It was raining. We were both stuck under the same tiny awning outside a bookstore, and we'd both forgotten umbrellas. She looked over at me with this fed-up, exhausted expression, like she'd had a day where everything went wrong, and she laughed out loud for no reason. Not a cute giggle. A real laugh, the kind that makes other people want to join in. We talked until the rain stopped. Then we talked afterward. Then we exchanged numbers. The next day turned into dinner, and dinner turned into something neither of us expected. She never asked what I made. She never asked what car I drove. She never tried to measure me. She asked who I was, what I believed in, what I wanted to build in life. The first time she introduced me to her mother, I didn't expect fireworks, just civility. And, at first, I got that. But as the months went on, the comments started. Little ones, never loud, never aggressive, just tiny darts meant to slip beneath the skin. "Oh, you're still working with those small businesses? You haven't considered doing something more stable?" Or, "Emma, you've always had such potential. You could be with someone who matches that." She never said I wasn't good enough. She never had to. Every word aimed a little lower than the last. But she didn't know why I did the work I did. My father wasn't rich, not even close. But he had this way of making you feel like everything would always be okay. He used to say, "Your worth isn't measured by what you have. It's measured by what you give." I watched him live that truth every day. He gave his time to neighbors, friends, old co-workers, anyone who needed it. My mother was the same, kind, patient, always trying to make someone's day easier than it was before. So when I got older, my career choice wasn't about climbing ladders. It was about helping people who rarely got help. Small business consulting wasn't glamorous, but it meant something to me. Every shop, every cafe, every restaurant I worked with had a story behind it. Families fighting to stay afloat, people trying to make dreams real, people like my own parents. And that's how I met Robert Bennett long before he became the owner of one of the city's most successful restaurants. His restaurant wasn't luxurious back then. It wasn't buzzing with wealthy diners. It was dimly lit, quiet, and half forgotten. I walked in one evening after a long day because I didn't feel like cooking. He was sitting alone near the bar, surrounded by bills and spreadsheets, the weight of everything pulling his shoulders down. I'd seen that look before. My dad wore it the year his own business nearly sank. Something in me couldn't ignore it. I remember approaching him carefully. "Rough night?" I asked. He didn't fake a smile, didn't pretend. He just sighed. "Rough year." We ended up talking until closing. He told me how his restaurant used to thrive, how loyal customers faded away when bigger chains moved into the area, how debt piled up, how he didn't know what else to do. I didn't see a failing business. I saw a man drowning with no one throwing him a rope. Before I even thought it through, I said, "I can help you. No charge." He stared at me like he thought he heard wrong. "Why would you do that?" I shrugged. "I've watched good people lose good things because they didn't get help soon enough. Let me try." He nodded slowly. And that was it. We worked together for weeks. Late nights, early mornings, sketching out plans on napkins, redesigning menus, renegotiating suppliers, creating ads he didn't know how to run. He tried to pay me. I declined. I didn't want anything from him. And eventually his restaurant stabilized. Then it flourished. Then it expanded. Then it became this place, this private dining room, this spotless table where I stood without a seat. He told me once, "I'll never forget what you did." I believed him, but I never expected to see him again. Life moves on. People move on. I definitely never expected to need him. The sound of a chair scraping the ground pulled me out of my thoughts. Emma's younger brother shifted uncomfortably, pretending to adjust his napkin. Her dad opened his mouth twice like he wanted to say something, then silently took another sip of water instead. No one knew what to do. No one knew what to say. And in the middle of that awkward tension, Linda finally spoke. "This is unnecessary," she said calmly, gesturing toward the door the waiter had disappeared through. "The owner doesn't involve himself in things like this. You'll just make him think we can't handle a simple misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Emma snapped. Linda's expression tightened, but she kept her tone smooth. "I didn't mean to offend anyone. The reservation was made last minute. The room had limited seating, and—" She stopped talking the moment she realized the flimsy excuses weren't convincing anyone. I didn't argue, didn't smile, didn't even look at her. I just waited. And maybe that was what unsettled her most. Because for the first time since she'd met me, I wasn't trying to win her approval. I wasn't shrinking under her comments. I wasn't trying to be easygoing to avoid conflict. I was just standing there, calm, patient, unbothered. She didn't know me well enough to recognize this version of me. But she was about to, because the door in the back swung open. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the room to shift again. Someone was coming. Someone who knew the version of me she never cared to ask about. Someone she never expected to walk into her perfectly controlled evening. And as he stepped forward, wiping his hands on his apron, scanning the room for me, I felt Emma's hand tighten gently around mine, and I knew everything was about to change. The door didn't burst open. There was no dramatic gasp, no spotlight, just a soft creak and the quiet shuffle of someone stepping out from the back hallway. But the moment I saw him, my breath caught. His hair had gone a little grayer. His apron was newer than the last time I'd seen him. He looked more confident than the exhausted man I'd met years ago, but his eyes were exactly the same. Warm, honest, kind. He scanned the room, confused at first. Then he saw me, and his face changed completely. "Daniel," he said, almost like he didn't trust his eyes. He took a step closer. "Daniel Reed?" You know those moments where everything around you fades out, where the conversations, the tension, the awkwardness just melt into the background? That's what it felt like. "Hey, Mr. Bennett," I said, smiling without meaning to. "It's been a while." "It really has," he said, and there was this softness in his voice, something close to gratitude, or maybe relief. "What are you doing here? Why didn't anyone tell me? You'd arrived?" Before I could answer, he turned to the waiter. "Did he wait long? Why wasn't he seated?" "No, sir," the waiter said quickly. "It's a family dinner. They said—" Bennett's gaze shifted to the table, taking in the scene. The empty space where a chair should have been. The stiff posture of everyone seated. The discomfort hanging in the air like it had weight. And then he looked at Linda. She straightened her back as if that would shield her from whatever came next. For the first time the entire night she looked unsure. Not threatened, just caught. "I'm sorry," she said with a polite smile that didn't fit her face. "We simply had an issue with seating." Mr. Bennett didn't acknowledge the excuse. He walked straight to me and pulled me into a hug. Not a light, polite hug. A full, firm, grateful one. "I can't believe this," he said, pulling back to look at me. "I've been wanting to find you for years. My wife still talks about the plan you helped us build. You remember? The one you worked on night after night?" I nodded awkwardly. "I remember." "Most people wouldn't have done what you did," he said, almost more to the room than to me. "You showed up when we could barely keep the lights on. You didn't ask for anything. You stayed until things turned around." He laughed softly. "And look at this place now." I looked around. The chandeliers, the polished glass, the busy tables outside the private room, the elegant decor that wasn't just expensive, it was intentional, thoughtful. "You did this," I told him. "We did this," he corrected. The table was silent. Not because of shock, because they were witnessing something they couldn't interpret yet. Linda broke the silence first. I didn't realize you two knew each other," she said cautiously. "Daniel never mentioned—" "He wouldn't," Bennett interrupted gently. "He's not the type to brag." Her throat bobbed in a tiny swallow. He looked around again and frowned. "Why is he standing? Where's his seat?" No one answered. They didn't have to. He turned to a server near the door. "Bring another chair, and not from the back. Take one from the main floor and set a full place for him, the same setup as the head of the table." The waiter nodded and hurried off. The head of the table. I felt my cheeks warm, not from pride, but from the attention. I didn't want the moment to become a spectacle. But Bennett wasn't making a scene. He wasn't trying to show anyone up. This was simply how he treated people who mattered to him. He touched my shoulder gently. "Please, sit. I insist." I nodded, and he guided me toward the table. The staff brought a chair, beautifully carved, polished, clearly part of the main dining area, and placed it right beside Emma. As they arranged the silverware, Emma whispered, I had no idea you did all that. I shrugged, softly. It didn't really matter. It matters to me, she whispered, her eyes shining. Across the table, Linda watched the entire interaction with a stiffness she couldn't hide. Her jaw tightened, but under it was something else, a flicker of realization. Or maybe shame. For the first time, she looked at me like she was seeing an actual person, not an obstacle or an inconvenience. Someone with a history she'd never bothered to learn. The waiter returned with a bottle of wine I'd never seen before. Something old, from a shelf behind the bar where rare bottles sat untouched. Bennett lifted it gently. I keep this for important guests, he said. Then he poured me the first glass. I didn't take it immediately. It felt strange. Too much attention. Mr. Bennett, really? Daniel, he said softly, please. So I accepted it. When he poured for the rest of the table, Linda forced a smile. Well, she said lightly, though her voice cracked just a little. What a fortunate coincidence. It's not coincidence, Bennett replied kindly but firmly. Good people cross paths for a reason. She blinked, caught off guard by his warmth. Then he added, almost as if he'd been waiting to say it, if Daniel ever needs anything in this place, anything at all, it will be done. I didn't look at Linda. I didn't need to. The shift had already happened. Not because I'd won something. Not because she'd been embarrassed. But because, for the first time, someone who knew my worth spoke in a place where my words alone wouldn't have been enough. The rest of the table adjusted in subtle ways. Postures softened. Expressions shifted. Small talk slowly resumed, but it wasn't forced anymore. Emma leaned closer, her voice barely audible. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Not because of this, because you never used any of it to prove yourself. I swallowed, suddenly overwhelmed. I didn't think it mattered. It does, she said, even if not to the people you hoped it would. Dinner resumed with a different tone. The tension was still present, but now it wasn't aimed at me. It was sitting quietly on Linda's shoulders, waiting for her to do something with it. And as plates arrived and conversations scattered across the table, I caught her staring once or twice. Not with anger or suspicion. With thought, with reconsideration, with something that looked a lot like regret. She had never imagined the man she dismissed had once helped build the very place she loved bragging about. But I didn't take satisfaction in that. Not even a little. What I felt was relief. Like something that had been sitting between us for years had finally cracked open. And even though I didn't know what would happen next, I could sense the air shifting around us, settling into something that might eventually become understanding, or at least the beginning of it. The night wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time since arriving, I felt like I actually had a seat at this table. Dinner didn't magically transform into a cheerful family gathering, but the energy had undeniably shifted. It was quieter, softer, like everyone was suddenly aware of each other in a way they hadn't been before. Plates arrived, small, elegant dishes with flavors I couldn't pronounce but pretended to understand. The conversation never quite returned to normal. Little pockets of small talk popped up around the table, but they were weak, as if everyone was trying to feel their way through a new arrangement of invisible furniture. Emma pressed her knee gently against mine under the table, a silent reminder that she was there, that she saw me, not just tonight but always. Her father cleared his throat. So, Daniel, he began awkwardly, how did you meet the owner? You two seem close. I immediately felt a pressure creeping back into my chest. I knew a question like this was coming, but still. Explaining it in front of everyone, especially in front of Linda, felt strangely vulnerable. Not because I was hiding anything, but because sharing the truth now, after everything, Felt like showing a bruise someone else caused. I took a slow sip of wine and answered gently. I used to help small businesses. His restaurant was one of them. Her dad nodded thoughtfully. He didn't pry, didn't dig for details. He simply looked like he was processing a new piece of information he wished he'd known earlier. Across the table, Linda stayed silent. Her eyes stayed on her plate, her posture just a little too stiff, her wine glass turning slowly between her fingers like she was trying to ground herself with its texture. For once, she wasn't talking. Not even to Emma's sister. Not even to fill the silence she usually hated. It struck me then. Silence was not her comfort zone, and yet here she was, wrapped in it. Halfway through the meal, she finally spoke. Daniel. She didn't project her voice. She didn't lace it with sarcasm. She just said my name, plainly, almost gently. I looked up. I didn't know any of that, she said, about you helping him, about your involvement. The phrasing wasn't perfect, but it wasn't meant to be. It was clumsy, raw in a way that told me she didn't rehearse this one. Maybe she couldn't. I know, I replied quietly. I never mentioned it. She nodded once, eyes dropping back to her plate. May I ask why? It wasn't accusatory, it wasn't demanding. It was genuinely curious. The kind of question someone might ask when they suddenly realize the ground beneath them isn't what they thought. I shrugged softly. It didn't feel important to bring up. I helped him because he needed help, not because I wanted anything in return. Linda's gaze flickered up at me again. This time, there was something there, something she usually kept locked away behind polished expressions and controlled remarks. A crack in the armor. Right, she whispered, barely audible. You really didn't want anything in return? Nothing, I said. I was raised that if you can help someone, you should. That's all. She opened her mouth like she wanted to respond, but no words came. Instead, she picked up her napkin and dabbed at the corner of her eye before quickly masking it with a sip of wine. Emma squeezed my hand under the table, her thumb brushing over the back of it. She didn't need to say anything. I could feel the pride radiating off her. The rest of dinner moved slowly but steadily. Every once in a while, Linda lifted her eyes toward me as if examining a stranger she was meeting for the first time. Not the man she'd judged for years, not the man she'd dismissed at the door tonight. But someone new, someone she wasn't sure how to categorize anymore. When dessert was served, she finally spoke again, only this time she aimed it at the whole table. I think I made a mistake tonight. The room froze. Not dramatically, but in that human way where everyone senses something delicate is happening and doesn't want to break it. She breathed in deeply. I should have made sure there was a seat. I should have asked more questions. She stopped, frustrated at herself for not being able to articulate something she probably never thought she'd have to say. Emma leaned forward slightly. Mom, it's okay to just say it. Linda looked at her daughter with a tenderness she rarely displayed. Then she turned to me. I was unfair to you, she said. For a long time, without ever giving you the chance to prove me wrong, or right. I judged you because I thought I knew everything I needed to know. It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And that made it powerful. I let the silence breathe for a moment before responding. I never wanted to be in competition with you, I said gently. I wanted to be part of this family, for Emma. And because I care. Her lips pressed into a tight line, her eyes softening. I see that now. There was a pause. A fragile, meaningful pause. Then she swallowed and whispered, I'm sorry, Daniel. Across from us, Emma let out a breath she'd been holding since the night began. Her father gave a small nod, relieved. Her sister offered an awkward but genuine smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I didn't throw her earlier words back at her. I simply nodded and said, Thank you. because I knew how much effort those 2 words cost her. When dinner ended, everyone slowly stood and gathered their things. People began filtering out of the room, talking softly as they did. Emma hugged her sister goodbye, her dad patted my back, and the staff cleared the table. But then Linda approached me, alone. Not with an entourage, not with an audience, just her. "Can we talk for a moment?" she asked. I stepped aside with her, giving her space to speak. She looked at her hands before looking at me. I always thought Emma would end up with someone very particular, someone with a certain image. She hesitated, and I suppose I believed that image mattered more than it really does. I didn't rush her, didn't fill the silence. She continued, her voice thin but sincere. Tonight showed me that I might have been valuing the wrong things. I nodded slowly. We all get blinded by something sometimes. I was blinded by status, she admitted, by what other people would think, not what truly matters. That was the closest she had ever come to vulnerability in front of me, and maybe anyone. "Linda," I said quietly, "I'm not perfect. I'm not wealthy. I don't have the kind of background you imagined for Emma. But I love her. I'm trying every day to be good to her and good to this family." She inhaled sharply, her eyes glistening. "I know," she whispered. "I see it now." We stood in silence for a few seconds. Not uncomfortable silence, just the kind that settles when 2 people are finally facing each other without the armor of assumptions. She offered a small, shaky smile. "Thank you for being patient with me," she said. And for the first time, I believed she meant it. Emma walked over to us then, looping her arm through mine. "Everything okay?" Linda looked at her daughter in a way I'd never seen before, a mix of pride, humility, and something new. Respect. "Yes," she said softly. "I think everything is finally okay." And as we walked out of the restaurant together into the cool night air, I felt something lifting off my shoulders. Years of weight, misunderstanding, tension. Not gone forever, but lighter, manageable. It wasn't a perfect ending. Real life rarely gives us those. But it was enough. Enough to start something new. Walking out of the restaurant that night felt surreal. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just peaceful. The air outside was cooler than I expected, carrying that faint nighttime quietness that always makes the world feel softer. Emma slipped her hand into mine, and we began walking toward the parking lot slowly, almost like neither of us wanted to break the moment. "You handled yourself really well," she said quietly. "I didn't feel like I did anything special," I replied. "I just didn't want to make things worse." Emma stopped walking and faced me. Her eyes were warm in a way that made everything else fade out. "Daniel, you were humiliated. Anyone else would have stormed out or yelled or thrown the flowers at my mother's head." I snorted. "Tempting." She smiled, shaking her head. "But you stayed calm. You gave everyone space to show who they were, and when the truth came out, you didn't use it to hurt her." She squeezed my fingers gently. "That means something." I looked down, trying not to let the emotion catch me off guard. I wasn't used to being acknowledged like that. Not for restraint, not for dignity. Sometimes doing the right thing feels invisible. Sometimes it feels like it doesn't matter at all. But tonight, somehow, it did. We reached the car and Emma leaned against the door, arms folded. "Do you think she meant it?" she asked. "Her apology?" "Yeah." I exhaled slowly. "I think so. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not fully, but she meant enough of it to start." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That's all I wanted." We got into the car and drove home in comfortable silence, letting the night settle around us. The city lights flickered across the windshield. At one red light, Emma reached over and traced my knuckles with her thumb. "I love you," she said softly. I love you too. It was simple, but simple is what we were together. Steady, real, honest, and tonight reminded me that simplicity wasn't a flaw. It was a strength. I expected the next morning to feel awkward, or maybe heavy with tension, but breakfast was normal. Coffee tasted the same. The world outside my window didn't shift dramatically because my mother-in-law apologized. And yet, something inside me felt different. For the first time since marrying Emma, I didn't feel like I was fighting for a place in her family. I felt like the door, held shut for years, had finally cracked open. 2 days later, Emma got a text from her mother. Would you both like to come for dinner this weekend? I'd like another chance to host, properly. Emma looked at me cautiously. It's your call. It took me a moment. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be honest with myself before answering. Yeah, I said finally. Let's go. Emma smiled with quiet relief. The difference was immediate. When we arrived, Linda opened the door herself. She had no mask of superiority on, no stiff smile, just a woman trying to be better. Daniel, she said gently. Hi. Hi, I replied, matching her tone. She stepped aside and ushered us in. And this time, there was a place set for me. Thoughtfully, not as an afterthought. She'd even placed a small card with my name written in neat cursive. Wanted to make sure you felt welcome, she said quickly, almost embarrassed. It was a small thing, but small things mean a lot when they come from the right place. Dinner wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. Linda over-explained things sometimes, probably out of nervousness. She corrected herself mid-sentence a few times. She stumbled on certain topics. But she tried, not to impress, not to control, but to understand. When we were leaving, she pulled me aside again. I meant what I said the other night, she whispered. I don't want to lose my daughter because I couldn't accept the man she loves. And I don't want to lose the chance to know you either. The honesty in her voice surprised me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional manipulation. It was simply a human being admitting she was wrong and trying to change. Thank you, I said softly. I appreciate that. She nodded, and for the first time we hugged. Awkwardly, briefly, but genuinely. Over the next few weeks, things didn't transform magically. They evolved slowly, almost quietly. Linda started asking me questions. Real ones. Not interrogations, but attempts to learn. How did you get into consulting? What's something you've always wanted to do? What made you decide to help that restaurant owner all those years ago? Sometimes she'd open up too. I was raised to value appearances, maybe too much. I didn't want Emma to struggle the way I did. I forget that success looks different now than it used to. The conversations felt like two people finally meeting for the first time, even though we'd been in each other's lives for years. Emma noticed it too. She's trying, she said one night. Not perfectly, not always clearly, but she is. And she was right. Change isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet, steady, gradual. And for the first time, I wasn't pushing against a closed door. I was walking through one that was slowly opening. The following month, Emma and I visited the restaurant again, on our own this time. Bennett greeted us like family. He took us to a small table near the corner, the one he used to sit at when things were falling apart. He told us stories about those years, the struggles, the near misses, the nights he almost gave up. You didn't just help me with strategies, he said. You reminded me that people still cared. That mattered more than anything. Hearing him say that, I don't know how to describe it. Pride, maybe. Gratitude. Something warm in my chest that felt like closure. You changed more than you realize, he added, not just for me. I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but I felt it. Some kindness echoes longer than we expect. Months passed, and life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Linda wasn't perfect, not suddenly, not overnight, but she was different. More patient, more aware, more willing to pause before speaking. The biggest change wasn't in how she treated me. It was in how she treated Emma. Less pressure, less expectation, more listening. One evening, after a family gathering that actually felt like a family gathering, Emma and I walked to the car hand in hand. "You know," she said softly. "I think she sees you now, the real you." I smiled. I never needed her to think I was special. "I know," she said, "but it's nice that she finally realized you are." We drove home with the windows slightly cracked, letting in the smell of summer air. And as streetlights flickered overhead, I thought about how strange life is, how one night in a restaurant could unravel years of tension, how one moment of restraint could reveal who someone truly is, how one person's apology could unlock something that felt impossible to reach. But that's life, isn't it? It's not made of big, dramatic climaxes. It's made of quiet turning points, gentle shifts, simple steps toward understanding. Tonight, I didn't just feel accepted, I felt seen. And sometimes that's all a person needs. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that the way people see you isn't always the truth. Sometimes it's just the story they've convinced themselves to believe. But given time, patience, and the right moment, the truth finds its way out. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own journey, or made you feel a little less alone tonight, do me a favor, hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories just like this one. Thanks for listening. Really, it means more than you know.